Hello and welcome to part 3 of this video tutorial series on how to use the Primo tool to search for articles corresponding to various levels of evidence that are used to help answer PICO type questions. In the previous 2 episodes of this video we've talked about how to search for populations, the P in PICO, and we've talked about how to search for interventions, the I in PICO. We've talked a little bit about comparisons, the C in PICO, and we're going to talk today about how to ferret out levels of evidence and apply them to the articles that we're finding. So the first thing I want to do here is flip over to this page that describes the levels of evidence. It's a nice handy resource to refer to. So your level 1 level of evidence here, evidence from a systematic review, and I'm going to highlight this phrase right here because a phrase like that is going to be very useful when we're actually going to Primo and doing our searches. But it's not just any systematic review for a level 1, it's a systematic review of all relevant randomized controlled trials. Now, because Primo is not a complete and total collection of articles from all medical journals ever, or all conferences, medical conferences or anything like that, we're going to have to limit the all relevant part of that and just kind of set it to one side, but we can look for randomized controlled trials, which are also known as RCTs. We can also look for evidence-based clinical practice guidelines based on systematic reviews of RCTs. Basically, systematic review and randomized controlled trial are going to be our search terms here. Level 2, evidence obtained from at least one well-designed randomized controlled trial. Well, we can get at that using the same methods right there, just not including the systematic review phrase. Level 3, evidence obtained from well-designed controlled trials without randomization, quasi-experimental. Quasi-experimental is a good phrase to use when searching for those. Evidence from a well-designed case control and cohort study. Both of these, case control studies and cohort studies, are different phrases that we can use, and that will be very helpful. Level 5, evidence from systematic reviews of descriptive and qualitative studies. Again, we can search on systematic reviews and descriptive study or qualitative study to get at those. Level 6, evidence from a single descriptive or qualitative study. Same phrase, just don't use systematic review. And Level 7, evidence from the opinion of authorities and or reports of expert committees. That one can be a little bit more difficult to search on, but we have different ways of getting at that, and we'll give that a try. So to start with, we're going to deal with the level 1 evidence because it's the highest level of evidence that you want. It's easy enough to search for. So I'm going to go back to Primo here. So up here I've got the remains of our searches from yesterday, but I'm going to simplify that a little bit. I am not searching on supervised exercise programs. I'm just searching on supervised weight loss programs. And that just helps keep things a little bit simpler for dealing with. And I'm going to change to a slightly different Primo interface that gives us another line to work with to type things in there. That's the advanced search feature. It's not really that much different from the basic search, and you can see that our existing search has been reproduced up here. And you can add another line here, and you can use the and or the not combiner. I haven't talked about the not combiner much, but it's a way of saying I want everything else that I've typed up here, but I also want stuff to be eliminated from the result list if it is in there. So if there's a phrase or something that keeps popping up but you don't want it, you can use that not combiner and try to get rid of that phrase. I'm not really going to use that for today. So any here, this is a little bit useful. It can be any portion of the information that we have about articles that is in the title, the author, the subject headings, or the 2 standard numbers that get applied. ISSN is the International Standard Serial Number, meaning journal. ISBN is the International Standard Book Number. If you happen to have a particular book or journal journal that you're looking for stuff in, you can use those. Mostly, I just leave it set to any. So now I'm going to come back here and we're going to do our search on level 1 evidence systematic review. And I'm going to use parentheses to group things here. And I'm going to use a quotation mark. And that does is say I'm looking for exactly this phrase, not just these words, but exactly this phrase in the article that I'm using. And I want to find a randomized controlled trial, and I should group those words together as well because I have yet another group I want to use. And I'm going to group the group. So and I'm going to use either this randomized controlled trial idea or just RCT, because sometimes it's abbreviated that way. So with those here, we're looking for level 1 evidence, so we're looking for systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials or RCTs. Click the search button. Whoops, failed due to the incorrect use of Boolean operators and or brackets. Brackets being the parentheses here. So, right there. Closing the parenthesis right there. Okay, click search. And now we find 20 million articles that respond to all of this stuff. But if we trim it down to peer-reviewed journals, we get down to 206 articles. So strength training as a countermeasure to aging, yeah, that's not quite what we're looking for. Randomized trial, very good. Literacy-sensitive, culturally tailored diabetes self-management intervention for low-income Latinos. That could very well be a part of what we're looking for. We'd have to actually read the article, find out if it only applies to Hispanic men, or Latino men in this case, or if it applies to Latinos generally, and men is not treated as a subgroup of that. Relationship between exercise and metabolic abnormalities. Probably not what we're looking for. Exercise. So let me just double check my search up here and make sure that, nope, supervised weight loss program, but a lot of exercise is creeping into these results as well. Walking programs. So the summary at this point is, yes, we found a number of articles that mention all these things that we're talking about. Here we go. Weight change in control group participants in behavioral weight loss interventions, a systematic review, and meta-regression study. That looks pretty interesting. Do need to ask if it applies to Latino men only or if it applies to a larger group. That's something you'll have to read the article to find out. Behavioral weight loss interventions, which can be the same as a weight loss program. You have to read that and find out who it covers and what it's about. So the common theme here is, yes, you've gotten to the point now where the search is taking you about as far as it can, and you need to read the article to figure out whether it actually talks about what you're interested in as far as your population and intervention goes or not. So having said that, I'm going to back up here. We're going to go with level of evidence number 2 from at least one well-designed randomized controlled trial. Well, that's easy. I'm just going to remove the whole systematic review idea and do my search. And then come back and tell it I want stuff from peer-reviewed journals again. And there you go, 338 articles that you actually have to look at now to determine whether or not they meet your population and intervention needs. Level 3, well-designed case control and cohort studies. Okay, so a little bit about this. When translating this kind of thing into search terms that are usable in Primo, so the level says evidence from well-designed case control and cohort studies, but this is an English and the English word and means from one or the other of these groups of kinds of studies, or both of them together. Well, in Primo terms, that's actually an or, not an and. So we're going to go with well-designed case control or cohort studies. Now, nobody in talking about an article is going to say, well, I've got a well-designed case control study here. That's something that other people say about the article, but not what the article says about itself. So we're not going to include that in our description that we use for Primo. And we're going to come back here and we're going to say, zoop, we're going to get rid of these things, get rid of our RCT stuff, and we're going to use case control study. Well, I'm actually going to use stud and an asterisk to indicate that it could be study or studies, or, and that was a well-designed cohort study. So, or, and the asterisk again. Do that, click search, and when Primo gets back, it's going to tell us that we have 20 million some odd everythings. But interestingly enough, we don't have anything that comes from peer-reviewed journals. Let's see if we can refine this down a little bit. Either that or it all comes from peer-reviewed journals, and that may be the case. Yeah, this first batch, these all look like peer-reviewed journals, so maybe that's all we've got. That's a little weird because it doesn't necessarily include our Hispanic or Chicano or Latino. So let's try doing something else here. So first off, I'm going to provide another grouper, and I'm going to change this to study, spelling that correctly. And likewise, I'm going to come back over here and do study. One possibility is that we're looking at students as well as studies. And I'd like to eliminate that possibility and see what we get back. Here we go. Now we can trim it down to peer-reviewed journals. Now we can see that our population and our intervention are represented in our results. Glycemic control, but now notice that we're looking at individual word control rather than the group of words control studies. So one of the things that Primo does is if it can't find the phrase that you're looking for or can't find very many examples of the phrase that you're looking for in the list of articles that it knows about, it's going to go back and just break that phrase apart for you anyway. Here we go. Control studies of obese children. Home-based exercise intervention to increase physical activity, study design of a randomized clinical trial. So study design is a way of describing how a study was designed. That's not necessarily what we're looking for here because we want a control study. Here it is again. So once again, we've kind of hit the limits of what Primo can do, and now you have to go through and actually look at the articles to say if they actually address your population, your intervention. And let's take a quick look at the third level of evidence. Oops, I'm sorry, that was level of evidence 4 here. Quasi-experimental. I'm going to go with level 3 here just as one more example, and then we're going to finish up. So I'm going to copy the phrase quasi-experimental here just to make it easy to use, and I'm going to come back here and on our level of evidence line. I'm going to delete all that, and I'm going to use quasi-experimental as a phrase by itself, and I'm going to click my search button here and see what we turn up. 20 million things, but 24 of them come from peer-reviewed journals. Very good. Quasi-experimental, quasi-experimental. So this search looked like it turned up quite a bit of stuff, and again, we've hit Primo's limitations, and you have to review each article to see if it actually deals with your population and your intervention. Okay, so that's the quick and dirty on how to use the levels of evidence, which correspond to study designs or methodologies, and translate those into terms that Primo can use to go along with your population and your intervention. So that ends the series. Thank you very much. If you have questions, please send them to me at Gallagher Star, that's SGALLAGHERSTARR at nwcu.edu, or you can just send them a little more easily to librarian@nwcu.edu, and I'm happy to answer those questions and work things out with you and try to come up with better searches. That's what I do. Thank you very much and have a good day.